welcome to the new museum and this really special evening tonight, the talk about Robert Colescott. And I particularly want to welcome Lowery Stokes Sims. The curator of the exhibition upstairs, and who also organized the Colescott retrospective that appeared at the New Museum in 1989, along with our other panelists, Mimi Roberts. So, yay. Thank you both. You must feel like deja vu.
I know, and this is the last time. I'm divorcing Bob.
You are.
40 years, no alimony, fuck him.
So we've got two of the world's foremost authorities on Bob Colescott here. So we're really thrilled to have you both. And I just want to mention a couple of other things about Lowery, who has a long history with the New Museum, starting with co-curating a show on art and ideology in 1984. I missed that one, I'm sad to say. But then Colescott in 1989 with Mimi, and contributed to the catalog on the Decade Show in 1990, Thornton Dial. Remember that one in 1994? And most recently, Nary Ward, We the People. So you were also a great friend of our founder, Marcia Tucker. And so remembering her tonight, too. So it's just, we're celebrating all the groundbreaking work that you've done over these decades. And we're so sorry that Carrie's flight got diverted, but so happy that you're here on Zoom. Look at you. You're huge. And I hope it wasn't too hairy of a ride. Gosh. Oh, no sound. Okay, we'll never know. I hope you all had a chance to see the wonderful exhibition upstairs. It was beautifully overseen here by our senior curator, Carrie and Muriari. And there it is. And if you haven't seen it, it's open tonight until 9, so you can go up afterwards. And then finally, this evening is generously co-presented with the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, and I want to invite Lucas Museum Director Sandra Jackson Dumont to come up to the stage. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, wow. It's nice to be back in New York. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, for allowing us to participate in this program. I am going to share some introductory remarks about you all, but first I'd like to say you all might be wondering why we are here, why I am here, why the Lucas Museum is here. I just have to say that we find Colescott's work to be some of the greatest narrative art work to enter into the realm of the world, honestly. I also want to say that we are so grateful to have in our collection Bob Colescott's work. So since we're live, I'm actually just going to read my remarks, which is very unusual for me if anyone knows me, so I'm just going to go there. So the Lucas Museum is delighted to co-present tonight's program with the New Museum, and I want to thank our colleagues Lisa and others from this incredible institution. I say Lisa Phillips and say Lisa in kind of lightly, but I've been an admirer of hers since my days as a fellow at the Whitney Museum of American Art, where she is an incredible person there too, and great curator. We also want to acknowledge our colleagues in curatorial here, the artistic director Massimiliano Gianni and curator Carrie. I'm going to butcher your name, and so I apologize. So I'll just say the incredible Gary. Also, I would be remiss if I did not say that the education director, Andrew Westover, has been really incredible in helping shape the program tonight, and in no small feat, our people also from the Lucas Museum. I just want to take a second to give a shout out to everyone watching around the world tonight. There are a lot of people that have been excited to hear about this exhibition via live stream, so hello to you all, and we are grateful to be able to also support expanding the incredible accessibility work that happens here at the new museum with cart captioning for tonight's audiences. So we operate on the belief that visual storytelling can connect us to help and shape a more just society. We believe that artists like Bob Colescott did just that, but he was ahead of his time. And we also think that it's important for collections like ours, like the New Museum and others, to really feature expansive works around narrativity to help us understand who we are and the role of art in society. And we are so grateful that places like the New Museum have paved the way. That said, I would also say that George Washington Carver crossing the Delaware, page from an American textbook, was really a work of art that helped the world understand what the Lucas Museum would be in the art world. A place that would substantiate and support this kind of work of art, deal with difficult subjects, but at the same time celebrate the mark that an artist like this can make on society, and also place his work in the context of art history. I'm so thrilled tonight that this particular exhibition really comes together to actually place his work in the context of his own work in the context of also contemporary art. Lastly, I am here to just say that Lowery Stokes Sims is one of the most important people to me, but also to the art world on so many levels. I actually have like really generous remarks here, but in the interest of time, I think that you all could go online and learn more about these amazing, amazing people. There's Lowery Stokes Sims, there's Carrie Mae Weems, oh my goodness, who actually shape-shifted to make sure that she actually got off of a flight and ran back home in the dead of a rainstorm to get back home. And then there's Mimi, who is an incredible scholar in her own right, and we all are indebted to her for placing Bob Colescott's work on the world stage. Thank you so much, and without further ado, I'll pass it over to these great folks.
So this is not exactly how I thought it was going to be this afternoon, but we're going to work with this. So when Gary and I were talking about a panel, I thought that it would be interesting to bring Mimi and Carrie together, and we could start the conversation about the 1997 Venice Biennale. And then I also knew that they had lots of opinions about Colescott otherwise, and the conversation will hopefully go on from there. So I'm not sure how they're going to do this, show the slides and show Carrie, but I'm having a little kind of shifting here. But it's good to look at this first one because these are things that I found online about the 97 biennial, you know, two sort of artifacts and the cover of the catalog, which then came to the United States. So I thought, okay, we can fade back to Carrie now. Mimi, I wanted you to talk about how you decided to propose Bob to the Federal Advisory Committee on International Exhibitions. And as a matter of fact, in full disclosure, I was on the panel that chose Bob to be the U.S. representation at the 1997 biennial. I was just wondering, what made you think the art world was ready for his work? And do you think the environment was different or similar to the one that you and John Albrands organized for the first retrospective of his work in '87?
So, as a three-parter, so I hope I remember all three parts, but you can prompt me. So, the first part is I did not decide, truthfully, to propose Bob. That I was recruited. And the conversation was a phone call from Mitchell Kahn, who is also a Whitney person. I met him in the Whitney Independent Study Program. We became very close friends. And he was the person actually who had introduced me to Bob's work many years earlier. And he called me and we had a conversation about, you know, a decade has passed. There's a whole new body of work. And this should, you know, this should be done. And I think you should do it. It was sort of the conversation. So it's interesting though, you know, it was kind of a group decision. It wasn't like I would have thought of it necessarily. Also wouldn't have thought of it because who knew how this committee worked? Not me, which is that anybody can propose an artist for Venice. I assume it still works that way. Like, I was an independent curator, I had no institutional backing, and I did it, And so in February, there's a meeting in Venice where you're called a commissioner, this is hilarious, all the commissioners gather, and people were just really amazed, like that this is how Americans do it, that anybody can propose, and that an independent curator could be selected, and an artist outside of really pretty much the mainstream. So that was part of how it came together. Did I think the art world was ready? I had the thought never crossed my mind that Bob would be selected. I was doing this as a political protest. I did it. I mean, I put my heart and soul into it because I thought he deserved it, and it's something that should happen. But it absolutely never crossed my mind that he would be selected, because it just didn't seem plausible. So I did it really with not thinking those deep thoughts about is the art world ready or whatever. That said, timing is everything. And I just feel like lucky that the time was right. Did you ask me what it was different? Was it different than when we did the show in 87? So I think the difference between Reagan and Clinton, would Bob have been chosen during, that era? Probably not. Clinton era was more populist. It was, I think, so that was part of the timing. Maybe it was political, but I don't really, I don't know, because I didn't get to be on the panel because they chose Louis Scratchos instead of me. But I think, and if anybody is thinking of proposing for the next biennial, I hope it's a Native American artist, because I feel like in terms of timing, that is what's overdue right now. So.
Yeah. So when you and John, approached me to work on the 87 exhibition at San Jose, why? Why did you all want to do that exhibition at the time? And
so John was kind of new to the museum, and the board of directors had great aspirations. The tech thing was starting to happen, the .com thing, and I just sort of looked around the terrain there, and I thought, well, the niche for the museum was all those shows that SF MoMA and the other museums in the Bay Area would never do. And Bob was a bit, we thought he was a Bay Area artist. Now I come to New York, he's a New York artist. But so I just thought, this is the type of thing we can do that will set us apart from trying to compete where you can't compete, number one, but also really doing something significant for the Bay Area. And I really feel like today, being in this museum, that the new museum is kind of doing the same thing here, of finding that path. So anyway, that was what we were doing there. Here's a significant artist. Nobody else is going to show him. We'll do it.
Okay, because I was just thinking there's like any number of Bay Areas artists you could have chosen. And you chose this guy who does these really provocative images, so I think that sort of really explains it. Can we go to, before we come back to Carrie Mae, can we go to the thing? This is the photograph that accompanied the catalog for the exhibition. It's an unusual photo because one expects to have a photograph of the artist, and instead we have photographs of Bob in his studio with Carrie Mae. And the title of the exhibition is All These Things Here. Framed by modernism, seduced by one another, yet bound by certain social conventions. You framed the likes of me, and I framed you. But we were both framed by modernism, even though we knew better. We continued that time-honored tradition of the artist and his model. So can we go back to Carrie Mae? So Carrie Mae, I would say that this photograph is one of the most provocative images of the artist studio that exists. Would you agree with me? What did you think was expected of you when you were commissioned to do it, and how did you decide to do it in the end?
Well, first of all, it's really wonderful to see you, Lowery, to see you, Mimi. We haven't seen each other in years. Lowery, I haven't seen you in a few years, so it's really great to just be with you. So thanks for inviting me to participate and to think about um, Colescott. I haven't seen the exhibition yet. I'm really hoping to. Um, well, it was interesting. First of all, which is another kind of question for Mimi, maybe she'll come back to that as well. Why did she select me? And, how was I chosen actually to make this quote official portrait of, of Colescott? But once I was called and once I had the assignment, I had, of course, I had met Bob earlier. I had met him maybe 10 years earlier at UCSD when I was a grad student, and he came actually to present his work. I think he was actually in competition for a position at UCSD, a teaching position with Faith Ringel. And Faith actually got the position. And at that moment, I was younger, a lot younger. And Bob came to do this presentation, and I thought, what is this? What is this? He really kind of knocked me off my socks. I wasn't sure what to think, how to think. I was puzzled, I was perplexed, but I was also really deeply interested. And he was the first painter that I had met who was working in this very particular kind of way on this edge of comedy and cartoon, but yet also really a masterful painter. There were all these things that were going on in the work, and so I was completely perplexed by Bob. So when I got this call from Mimi, who commissioned me ultimately to make the official portrait, I thought long and hard about the meaning of painting, and certainly the meaning of painting at that moment in the 90s, when so much about painting was being really open to question. The death of painting, the end of painting, all of those sorts of things were being bantered about. And so but yet we were still dealing with the scope of of a painter. And I think that Mimi shared with me that Bob actually suggested that I make his photograph. And Mimi, am I right about that?
Yes. Yes, you are.
Yeah, Bob actually suggested that I make the photograph. And so I thought, well, if he's asking me based on what he knows about me, then he's actually not looking for a traditional portrait, right?
You
A
two,
headshot of himself. That's not what he's looking for.
let me ask you: had you two seen each other after USDC?
No, no,
Okay.
no. Maybe once or twice, but no, I don't remember really seeing him after that initial meeting at UCSD. So I packed up all my cameras and I flew out to his house, and I thought about that. I knew that he was looking for something that was critical, that he was looking for something that was as questioning about him and his practice as he was questioning his relationship to painting and art history and how to bring that history forward. And so I started working. I made some decisions about how I wanted to work with him. I asked him a certain set of questions. We spent maybe a few hours talking before I arrived, and then a morning talking while I was there, working, sitting in his studio. And then I decided that I knew really pretty much how I wanted to actually make the work, that it wouldn't be a single photograph, it would be a series of pictures, and that somehow, and I wasn't sure at that moment how, but it was in talking with Bob actually that the narrative actually emerged, that I knew that I needed to make a critical piece about Bob, and a critical piece about painting, and a critical piece about modern art, and our relationship as Black subjects to the field. And I think it actually, in a lot of ways, kind of hit the nail on the head. And I'll tell you some other stories about that later. But making that decision about questioning the role of the artist, about questioning the role of the model in relationship to the artist, of questioning the relationship about the painting to the canon, was the way that I thought would be actually most important and useful, as a way of making an artwork about an artist.
That's great. I thought what we might do, it struck me that Bob has sort of dealt with the subject matter of the artist in his studio with a model throughout, in several paintings. So we're going to fade you out, put up some paintings, but feel free to talk over the paintings if you have any
Sure.
comments. So here are three, um, mostly done between 78 and 83. I love the first one, the portrait of the artist at 85. I don't know if that's supposed to sort of give him some leeway about things. I don't know. And then one that's been really talked about in many of the reviews of the show, Beauty is the Eye of the Beholder, and there are many interesting questions about who the model is. And then Bad Habits, where it's almost like, the sort of bad habits and the obsessions of the artist sort of float above his head as he's creating. So I thought it was kind of interesting because Mimi, in talking about, you sort of picked up on the idea of the gaze.
Well, yeah.
Bring the mic close to you, Larry.
Sorry?
Yeah, sometimes when you tilt the mic
Oh,
away
okay.
from.
All right. I'll
You're
keep it
gonna-
right up here.
Mike.
Okay. Yeah.
So, the gaze. Well, because you brought it up in our lead up to this, and one of the ways you can go through this show is just watching the gaze, right? And so I think that's just something to watch out for. Also, the accessories, the shoes, like there's always something that slays in these paintings. So the checkered slippers just do it for me in this one, but the hats and the shoes are just always. The gaze is there though implicit, even when it's not explicit, and so I think that was something that you had talked about in
Right.
terms of Carrie Mae. If we could flip back to Carrie Mae's thing, and the artist's gaze on the model or wherever he's gazing or wherever the sort of main figure is gazing is always kind of a clue to something. Right. Yeah.
The sort of willingness to, a part of, I think, his sort of brilliance is this willingness to really poke fun at himself, to really question himself constantly about his relationship as a painter to painting and to the canon itself. I mean, he's never only thinking about the end game. He's really thinking about the way he's processing himself as the artist in the space, right? And I think that that's the thing that's so important about the work, his ability to laugh at himself, his ability to sort of make fun of himself, to position himself in that place of trying to sort of sort out who he is and the meaning of his work in relationship to painting, I think is really sort of exceptional. I can't think of another artist really who really quite does that. And of course, the first painting it showed Lowery is, his own spoof on Picasso, right? And then his spoof on Matisse. I mean, that he's really trying to figure out how to situate himself, as an African American man in relationship to a canon that has historically excluded the likes of him.
Well, I think that one of the things that you nailed so beautifully in that triptych, and that also Quincy Troop did in the poem, which was also in the catalog, commission for the catalog,
Let's put up the triptych again, please.
was it's such an invitation into the artist studio and the artist creative process. And
Go
this
one back.
that was a really key thing for me in terms of Venice and the decision. Commissioning Carrie was like, I said to Bob, we need a headshot for the catalog. And he's like, well, how about Carrie Mae Weems? I was like, I'm going to call, hell yeah, I'm going to call Carrie Mae Weems. What the hell? And so this really, but the idea to use it in the pavilion was a real relief for me, and the poem too, because it was a little awkward, me being white and everything. And I thought, oh God, I have to write an intro panel, really, for the Biennale? But this was such a beautiful introduction because she just nailed everything here, like making the connection. Well, another thing that was important to me was making an intergenerational connection because, it's a 73-year-old black guy and you're going to Venice and he's a figurative paint, and so that just was, I didn't know exactly how I was going to do that, but then he suggested Carrie Mae Weems, and then I suggested poetry, and somebody suggested Quincy Troop, but making the connection, right? The shared, framed by modernism, bound by certain, so making the connection, but then the kind of critique comes in, right? Because who's in control? Who's in control, right? And I think that was what, I'm wildly speculating here because I really haven't talked to anybody about this, but for African American women artists who were there at the Biennale or saw this piece, this had to be like transformative, right? Because she's totally in control here.
Did you feel that that's what you wanted to do, Carrie?
They were all my decisions. They were all and it was about controlling the situation, really sort of understanding really the context that we were both in, and I think what we might be able to do with that context. And I have to tell you a very funny story.
Uh-oh.
Here
we go.
Here it comes.
And so we worked together for most of the day. We made the photographs, and I knew when I left his studio that night that it was the right thing to do, right? That every decision was the right decision. I think I probably by then had started in my mind kind of constructing the language that I thought might accompany the photographs. And at that moment, Bob was actually seeing a person, a woman that he was involved with. And when Bob told him what the photographs were and what we had done that day, she was livid. And she said, if this goes on the wall, I won't be at the Biennale. But I think finally we kind of got through to her that this was art. This was not seduction of her man.
So you say.
It's something that really simply needed to be done, and that it was really, I think, really important for both of us. And we spent, after we made the photographs, it took maybe it was 2 or 3 hours of working in the studio together. I think he really understood finally what I was actually after, and simply engaged with me in every way. Whatever I asked him to do was what he was willing to do. And out of that shoot, I think importantly for me, and I'm not sure Lowery or Mimi, even if you know this, but coming out of that shoot led me to produce a whole new body of work about my relationship to painting and to painters, right? Over a sort of course of history that was very, very important to me, that was called Not Monet's Type.
Okay, let's hop ahead to that. I think we have to go about 5 slides. Could you?
Right. And so out of that encounter came something else. And of course, came my very deep friendship with Bob. and my very deep friendship with his partner
Well,
ultimately
let's look at
as
not
well that
mayonnaise
continues
type.
to this day.
Let's look at not mayonnaise type, which you did about the same time. Can we
Yeah,
move
right
ahead?
after making
Yeah.
this project with
Keep
Colescott.
going. We'll come back to these. Keep going. There we go. These are the first two.
And I'll read the text
Okay, go back.
if they're on screen.
Okay. You want to read them?
Actually, I really can't see it from where I'm sitting, but it says something like, I can't read it.
I'll read it. Standing on shaking ground, I posed myself for critical study, but was
It was
no
no
longer
longer certain of the questions to be asked.
right. It
It
was
was clear I was not Monet's type. Picasso, who had a way with women, only used me, and Duchamp never even considered me.
next one. Next slide, please.
But it could have been worse. Imagine my fate had de Kooning got hold of me. I knew not from memory, but from hope that there were other models by which to live. And so it was, and so it was just coming out of this relationship with Bob and really sort of thinking about the way in which Bob then had decided to use the figure in his work, uh, whether they were men or women, black or white, and varying shades of brown, that he had sort of laid the groundwork for another kind of imagining of the female subject himself. And I think, again, that's the thing that for me becomes one of the more important things about the way Bob actually worked.
So I think it's interesting, the conversation that we had from the point of view that Bob consistently referred to himself as a modernist, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to a postmodernist, which is of course the context within which his work was received. So this reminds me of comments you made in the interview that we have in the catalog about the lack of critique and theory in the discussion of the work of African American artists beyond the issue of blackness. Do you think that situation has changed in the last 2 or 3 years?
No,
Mm,
I don't.
yeah,
Unfortunately, you know. I
yeah,
mean, so, the critique of art and critique of painting, and I actually have a question for you too, Lowry.
yeah.
But I think it's really difficult, right? It really, that it's hard work. It's demanding. It requires a certain kind of expertise and a certain kind of training and understanding and perspective. And for the most part, I think that um, curators, historians have come up lacking for the most part in the way in which African American artistic practice is practiced. And there's yet to be a vocabulary that's been developed, or rather, maybe I should say, that we've been separated in a way from the discussions around modernism. And so race, it seems to me to be fairly easy, a sort of easy out. I think we've given art historians a kind of easy out so that they really don't have to do the heavy lifting of really talking about what Bob is doing in the work and the terms of the conversation, the debate that is really going on in his own imagination around being positioned as a modern painter, as a modern artist, right? I mean, that's what he's doing when he's to stake a claim or to put that stake in a territory that is really meaningful. And I think to the extent that we've been left out of that discussion is to the extent that the art world continues to suffer. And criticism continues to suffer, and art history continues to suffer. If there's a way of talking about this work that has not yet quite been nailed, Lowry, and I don't include you in that debate in what I'm saying, but I am talking about generally about the field.
Well, I think, in my experience working with people like Bob, Wilfredo Lam, in particular, that the modern is so heavily loaded towards a Eurocentric propriety, and when you bring up the whole essence of modern, then you have to sort of deal with how much modernism has to be indebted to the arts of Africa, the arts of the Americas, and the
Of course. So,
Pacific.
so it's like a false claim.
Right. I
A
think
false.
one of the most interesting articles I ever read, Stanley Okay, forgetting his name, it'll come to me. He did this extraordinary thing where he talked about how in 1907, if Picasso was looking at African art to create a new art, that somewhere on the west coast of Africa, someone
Mhm.
was making a traditional shrine, but to capture the essence of brilliance and translucency to attract the powers and the deities, they would
It's from-
use liquor bottles, which is like, again, a break with tradition, so that it gave agency to the so-called primitive artists in a sense. And I think that I've been doing a lot of research over the last year of the incredible plethora of Black artists that have come onto the market. I just started randomly collecting them last year, and I have like a database of 500 individual artists.
Yeah,
Lots
it's
from Africa.
exploding.
It's
It's
exploding.
amazing. It's amazing. It's
But-
amazing.
But everybody's like focusing on portraiture. They're not focusing on what the work is doing and
Mhm.
why. It's all about portraiture and representation, which is important, but how are people doing portraiture and representation? What kinds of things are they bringing to it? So there's still a lot to be done, with
There's an extraordinary amount to be done. We're in this sort of fascinating moment. I mean, it's so amazing, right? Half of what's produced, half of what I produce is meaningless and useless, right? Much of what I produce is. I mean, there's like this little sliver, it's like sliver of work that really, sort of gets to where I'm trying to go. Sort of crawling, as I say, towards my humanity. And I think that that's true for the vast majority of artists that are working.
Now, I think that one of the things that we have to sort of talk
And
about,
the market of culture
yeah,
in and of itself, is driving the car.
no, I think that's absolutely true. Austin, how are we doing on time? Okay, good. Now, I think that you had, Carrie, talked about how when you first saw his work, you found it challenging and provocative, bordering on the grotesque. And Mimi, you said you talked to Fred Wilson, who said he respected it, but he found it liberating, but sort of cringeworthy, in a sense. I'm going to put up a quote from Huey Copeland that I found that he wrote in 2009 after Bob's death. Can we get the slide with the text?
But see, Larry, I think you're being completely unfair.
Oh.
Because you spent 40 years or more than 40 years, really investigating this work. You spent a lifetime looking.
Yes.
Not only in relationship to Colescott, but Colescott in context with a whole group of other artists,
Right.
that emerged from that.
Right.
Even if we talk about Kara Walker, in
Right.
a way,
Right.
emerged out of Colescott. Colescott really laid the groundwork
Right.
for Kara to do what she went on to do, right? And she did it, of course, differently and silhouette and so forth. And of course, there are other issues that are involved, but clearly Colescott was a serious barometer to that
Yep.
work. And so you can look at, Michael Ray Charles, and
Right.
There's a whole host of other artists that were sort of beginning to sort of unpack the notion of stereotype. And as you said, he was a forerunner in that way, though I think that the work is far deeper and more challenging. That the stereotype is just the first layer. It's the thinnest layer that allows you to penetrate the complexity, really, of the work. But I am wondering about your own relationship to Colescott and why you just.
Well, I decided to work on this work. I got a story for that. Come back to us, Carrie Mae. Oh God, she's really frozen. All right, so why did I start to work on Colescott? Um, I started to work on Colescott because when I first saw his work in the late 70s, it was like so unlike anything that a black middle class Catholic girl, school girl had ever seen in her entire life. She had gone to college and she had been mired in feminism and sort of the Black Power movement. And it was interesting because I go to the women's group and we'd have some kinds of discourses. And then I would go to the Black Students Union group and I would be told that the place of the woman in the revolution was prone. So, caught between those three nexus, I walk into a show with Henry Gelzeller, who was my first, he was the one who took me down there. Henry uncharacteristically one day came into the office and said, I am taking you down to see a show. I said, well, okay. We walk into Semaphore and I look at these paintings and I go, holy shit. How can anybody do that? So I think I was attracted to the transgression because essentially I'm a very boring, conservative kind of person. So vicariously through Bob's work, I could sort of see a lot of the truisms of my life just blown up. Carrie, come back. Anyway, I put up this quote from Huey because I think that still, as we are challenging Bob's work,
Okay.
Are you back? Are you back? Oh, you're back. Did you hear everything I said? Carrie, did you hear everything I said?
He's muted. Oh,
Hi. Can you
We're
hear
back.
it? Yeah. Did you hear everything I said?
I didn't hear a word. Not a word. You were frozen right after I finished asking my question.
I essentially said that Bob Colescott allowed a middle class, black, Catholic school raised woman like myself to indulge in her hidden transgressions. And I won't go into details.
Well, I've been fascinated with the work that you've been doing, Lowery, for years. Both you and working, of course, with our dear friend Leslie, and how you've done it has just been absolutely remarkable. You've really set a precedent that I think is really important, that your voice is so important to the field. And I'm often really sort of thinking about the field, what we're doing in the field and how we, how we add flexibility and elasticity and movement within the field by the questions that we ask. And so just thanks for being you. And Mimi, thank you for bringing Colescott to the Biennale.
But a curator is only as good as the artist she has to work with. Okay? So I think I want to start getting the audience. We have a whole bunch of images, but I mean, listening to Mimi and Carrie Mae is so captivating. I just want to think at this point we should open it up to the audience.
Can we see a
With
few
some
more
comments.
paintings while we're talking? Can we
Okay, let's roll the paintings.
I like to see the work.
Okay. Yoo-hoo.
So then this exhibition was curated by.
It's curated by me, working with Matthew Wesley, who had done his master's thesis on Colescott, and also Rafaela Plato, who was the director of the CAC, who was the person with why we have this show, because she was the first museum person who came to me at this point and said, I want a complete show of Bob Colescott's work. And it was a perfect kind of timing. She loves his work. She's a German curator originally. She's now director of the Speed Museum. And she had a clear view of how his work related to the sort of satirical, political work in Germany between the wars with people like George Gross and Otto Dix.
One of the things that happened after Bob was selected for Venice was there was concerns around, this is a quintessentially American artist. There are all these word plays. People who are not American are not going to understand it. And what was interesting about that is I think in Venice, probably the non-Americans got it better than the Americans. They know our culture. And also, Bob knows their culture, or So it was a really misplaced anxiety at the end of the day. But I did include quotes from Bob about the paintings in the catalog because I thought I needed to address it in some way. But anyway, so it was interesting too that it would be a European curator that would have the desire to see a full-on retrospective.
Well, I mean, he spent so much time also. I mean, Bob is was a learned man. He spent decades in Europe and spent decades studying, European painting. And he was very much, interested in pursuing and being a part of that tradition. I think to overlook that, I think, is really sort of problematic. That he was very much interested in seeing himself in a certain kind of way within a certain context, and to the extent that that we rob him of that, or we don't give him credit for these years of observation, study, and his immense understanding, the breadth of understanding that he had around contemporary modern painting, is to deny the best part of him.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna roll some paintings.
Right? His ability to bend it is the thing that's really interesting.
Yeah.
His ability to bend modern painting. But you can show the paintings while I'm talking. I don't need to do it.
Paintings. We need paintings. Please, can I have paintings? There we go.
Good. Lone
Okay.
Wolf in Paris is perfect, right? Because to Carrie Mae's point, here's a painting. I think Bob loved all things French, and I think other people have said, well, his mother was a Francophile or something, but he served in the military during World War II in France, and that of course was a huge impact, and then he was able to go back on the GI Bill, and so I think I have a totally different hit on this painting than about pinups and is that him, but I do think it's in a way a paean to that fact that he just loved to get back there every chance he got, and a lot of the art, especially African American, but other artists that served in World War II in France couldn't wait to get back. They came home. There was Jim Crow. There was discrimination. There was all this they couldn't wait to get back to the freedom that they felt when they were in Paris. So that's one of the things I think about when I look at that. The other thing I think about is he, unlike a lot of other artists, you can't commodify him. You can't commercialize him. Like, you're never going to see this on a wine label.
Well, this one always reminds me, because I'm such a great cartoon, old-fashioned cartoon, those Acme cartoons of the wolf, the things, and I just love it, because I sort of, can see Bob sort of like really sort of taking that on. And American Beauty is one of my favorites. I mean, it's just like, there she is in all her glory, and then you see this little sort of series of cartoon images that show you the backstage shenanigans, that sort of go on. I mean, it just sort of destabilizes, but at the same time reveals and begins to have so much relevance in today's world. Hey, you in the back row, I heard you. What are you talking about? Yeah, yeah. Isn't that the best part? Next one.
Beautiful.
I thought I put this one in, because I
You
was
graced
interested
it. That's
in,
so great.
yeah, it's such a, I thought Ariella Budnick's had such a different take on, the
I,
whole thing.
I accuse Larry of putting this quote here to provoke me because I just think she's so wrong. And, and I think that the idea of thinking about this in terms of, I mean, there is no pornographic film. I mean, I'm not an expert, but that would have a classical, reference like this. That's obviously not the point he's taking off on. What else does she say here that's wrong? Like like all the details. If you read the whole review, which I tortured myself, the knife, that is not a hunting knife. She refers to it as a hunting knife. That's a military issue knife, right? In the infantry, you would have maybe Bobby. Anyway, it's about killing people.
Nice. Well,
No, well, she's got the chisel. No, I'm talking about death over here. And the chisel is all, the chisel. But I just think, this is really not anything having to. I mean, the cartoony. We know already. He's established that his, that's his kind of signature style or whatnot. But yeah, I just thought no, she's.
I like this
she's
review
so-
because it was so cranky.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
She wasn't buying any of this. She was not buying it one more. And I think that that's so interesting because looking at what Roberta and even Peter Sheldell were, it's like almost 360 degrees from what they would have been writing 20 years ago.
well, but she gave a good review to the show.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it's like people have come around. I
In a
don't know.
long time.
I don't know about you all as visitors to the museum if you've seen his work before, but it seems that to be there's this kind of shift in the art world of finally getting the nuances of what Bob was trying to do. The one thing I think that people still need to sort of like deal with is how damn good a painter he was. Yeah. And the thing that was so interesting when the Whitney did the Fast Forward show and they put all their work from their collection of the all the hot shots from the 80s and stuff, this stuck out like a sore thumb because everything else was slick, even from next to Jean-Michel Basquiat, this stuck out like a sore thumb, in terms of the engagement with pigment, paint, the surface, texture, and all that kind of stuff. Next one.
It's a beautiful painting.
So have we resolved, do you think, Carrie Mae, all the ambivalence about these two paintings?
I resolved my ambivalences about Colescott a long time ago. I mean, not all of his work. I'm not a fan of everything that he ever painted. George Washington, crossing the Delaware is really not my favorite painting, but it's one of the paintings that's talked about a great deal. I mean, the painting that you showed us actually before, I think, is actually a much more interesting, much more engaging, more complex painting that that begs my attention in a very particular kind of way. And that's why one of the things that I was saying about what Bob does or did as a painter, is that on the surface there are all of these caricatures that apparently keep you on the surface. And if you're not willing to take the deep dive with him, to sort of peel back what those layers might mean, then you flee, then you're gone. right? And so, you have to be very brave, actually, to contend with Bob's work over the long haul. Otherwise, you really sort of miss the point of what he's trying to get to. But I do think that that often the way in which these paintings have been crossing the Delaware has been made, that we've really sort of missed, therefore, the boat. We've missed the boat on Bob.
Well, I think, again, oh, this is the other one, but that quote that was up there with the earlier slide with the temptators, again, just there to provoke me, because of all the things to think about with this painting, I think, that, first of all, I don't think he regretted the painting. I mean, you know better than I, but I think what he probably regretted, if he said he regretted something, is that artists, usually every artist I've ever known, thinks of their work as a progression, right? And everything that you do that's the most current is the most important and the best and all that and all that. And that's what you want to talk about. Well, poor Bob, every lecture, every interview, he had to talk about this painting, right? So he made it. I mean, I'm sure he regretted that. But the painting, what I find, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things going on here. And one of the things is he had a dual identity as a painter and an educator. And I think one of the things that comes together when you walk through the show is that here he synthesized his identity as, I mean, here it is, page from a textbook. He really wanted, and he was not sort of political in the kind of regular sense, I don't think, but one political position he did take was that Black people should be, reinserted in the, history. So I think, it's a political, but the other thing he's doing here is he has kind of developed the way he's going to use humor in his work, right? And starting with a recognizable reference point as a jumping off point, using the stereotypical images, almost like it's a little self-deprecating, I would say. And then also to Carrie Mae's point, like you have to get both the humor and the serious message, or else you miss it. And that's what that's why I just critique that review, because I think she has no sense of humor. And if you miss either one, then you're lost. So I like the way the show kind of hits you with this painting as a way of just saying, okay, now we're in the groove here, and we're going to continue on from here, elaborating on this in different. He gets interested in different things, but.
Well, it's sort of like, you put all of the stereotypes in the same boat and then you just sail them away.
Yeah, exactly.
You put them all in the same boat, and okay, so now we've dealt with that. Now what else is there? And that, I think, then becomes like the subtext of the painting itself.
No, I think it's interesting. For me, always for this painting, it sort of represents a kind of existential challenge for, I would say, African Americans in my generation. I'm 73 years of age, came up in the 50s and 60s. And the thing of it is that there was always this tension between, how you were expected to be a credit to your race and, a kind of despairing of other, African Americans who didn't live up to that. Now, there's many reasons why they didn't. We all know about the economics of race and social oppression and things like that. But this kind of tension of where you existed as a sort of singular type of person, and what you were expected to do to counteract what white society would sort of encapsulate as Black people in those stereotypes. That pressure was always there, and it's less now, but I don't think it's disappeared, totally. I remember some extraordinary conversations I had when Barack Obama was running for president, and you sort of, as I heard somebody say, well, the only Black people I know are welfare queens and pimps, and so, like, I think I like the idea that you talk about, Carrie Mae, putting them all in a boat and sailing them away. But for me, it's also that kind of pressure.
But yes, of course. But I think that that's why they were all in the same boat.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's absolutely the point. If we can put all of this and let's push that away,
Right.
right? Then we can start dealing with the deeper things about actually who we are,
Right.
right? And so, I mean, this is my sort of take on this work, and that particular piece. But of course, the thing that I know, and I'll say this, and then I'll bow out. You know that serious work takes a long time, and it takes an extraordinary amount of effort. It takes extraordinary amount of courage, and extraordinary amount of vulnerability, and that Bob was willing to lay it all on the line for us, not simply as as Americans, I think is really
Yeah.
an honor, and that he was willing to sacrifice himself um, for that, because it took a great deal of sacrifice. He could have painted it a whole other way. He had
Yeah.
all those tools,
Yeah.
all of that experience to paint in a very different way, but he decided to really lay this out for us as Americans. This is who we are. This is where we are. This is who I am in the midst of all of this and all of my confusion, because he never let up on himself. He never gave up
No.
on himself. The ability to critique himself, his sort of understanding of who he was, his complexities around his own identity, not only as an artist, but as a man, I think, and then as an artist, is really telling in this work. He has laid out something for us that, if we're serious, we'll be looking at for a very long time. So just thank you for the work that you've done, for bringing Bob back to us at this moment, because I
Yeah.
think it's probably needed more so now
Yeah.
than it was when it was actually made.
Yeah. I think that's true.
true.
And I think it's really exciting that George Washington Carver crossing the Delaware is going to be installed at the Met next to the Emmanuel Loisa starting in the fall.
Yes. All right. Well, that was the other. I mean, it's such an audacious move. Number one, to do that. Number two, just to like Bob sacrificed his white privilege, when he decided to self-identify as black, and that's sacrificing a lot right there, and I do think it's a really audacious painting. That was not a direct quote from Fred Wilson, but it is liberating, that he went to such lengths, that it just did open a floodgate, really, of work. But I forgot the other thing I was going to say. But yeah, just the audacity of it. Oh, the other thing is, so he wanted black people back into art history, but he also really believed his work and the work of other black artists should be. He believed in the grand tradition. He wanted to be part of the grand tradition, and he believed that artwork should be up on the wall in museums alongside. And so you see that happening with younger black artists, and it's great. But to see that going into the Met is like, that's a dream come true, right? Because that, to the extent he was political at all, I think that was what he fought for, really.
Yeah.
It's impossible not to be political.
Yeah.
What?
I mean, every painting, I mean, particularly, the last 25 years or so of his life. I mean, they are, it's in it. He's tussling, with these sort of deep questions of, of who he is and how to paint that and how to paint out his fantasies and his distortions and his confusion and his love and his desire, that, and to place that within the context of the moment was deeply political.
It was. Let me just clarify. I don't think he was like a joiner, a protester, a marcher. I meant political in that kind of he wasn't like an activist. It was through the painting, but it was definitely social commentary and political in that sense. So thank you for letting me clarify that point.
Questions?
Come on, people.
Come on, we want questions now. And they can be comments.
I didn't do that. Thank you for this dialogue. I've been taking some notes, and I'm really thinking about one painting in particular that was in the show. I think it's in the room, the third room, like as we're walking through, and it's a painting that is almost dissected in form by multiple different bodies. If I hold my phone up, I know you can't see it, but anyone near me
Is that School Days?
can see.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay. Well, it's a comment and a question about thinking more vigorously about how he's painting figures, as you were talking about earlier. Like, I think almost he's doing like a really interesting color field thing where the bodies become forms that create a composition that is so strong. And I don't know how to talk about it because I haven't learned how to talk about figuration being form and color. So
I think,
can you help me out with that?
Well, we'll try. I think you've hit on a really interesting point about Bob's work, particularly in the later work, because everybody gets caught up in the narratives and trying to identify everything that's going on, that they don't see what he's doing texturally. A lot of things that he's doing with the skin is that he's scumbling in dark colors into lighter skins and lighter colors into dark skins. And also in the way that he compresses the space, the figures then become these kinds of shapes that are creating the sort of barrier and the spaces that you're sort of, seeing in the painting. So it's not like this one point perspective back and you have a thing. It's like you have to navigate the figures. Sometimes they're like puzzles. He changes the perspectives in School Days, which is one of my favorites. There's this figure, that nude figure, has a huge head. And I was looking at it one day and I said, that looks awfully familiar. And I remember there was a Gauguin sculpture that he did as a Tahiti woman that I had seen in a gallery like 30 years before. And I said, I bet you that's where he, got that idea from. So yeah, it's figurative, it's narrative, but it's also using the recognizable elements of figure and environment as these kinds of shapes that sort of create the space that you are seeing in the paintings. So I think you've really picked up on something important. Come on, guys. I came up here from Baltimore. Carrie Mae's zooming in from Syracuse.
I always think it's great if people don't have questions. That means you've answered everything.
Sorry, I lost my voice earlier, but you mentioned that Faith Ringgold and Bob were competing for the same job, and I was just curious if they were ever in community or if they ever spent time together, and if Bob Colescott had any contemporaries that he relied on or were in conversation with while he was making his work.
He was very friendly with a motley crew, and I'm sort of like, because he used to come to New York and we'd have dinner, together. And Peter Dean was one person. Out in the West Coast, he was very close to Joan Brown and Manuel Neary and people like that. I'm blanking out. Peter Soul was an
Mary
acquaintance.
O'Neill.
Sorry?
And Mary O'Neill,
Right. So, yeah, he did
Oliver
have,
Jackson.
yeah. He did have, but each one of those artists was very distinctive and very individual in their own way.
But I don't know about his relationship with Faith, and I don't know if they were ever, if they were ever friends or not. I don't
Yeah,
actually know.
I
the
don't know.
answer to that. I
Gary,
would like to actually know.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask Faith about that.
Gary, the curator here, says that Faith wants to come see the show, so I think that's really cool. She's going to come and see the
Lovely.
show.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Well, and congratulations to her on her recent exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum, right? A knockout.
Here at the News Museum, honey.
Brooklyn. Was it? Excuse me. Sorry.
Yeah. Nancy, did you want to say something? That he was friends with who? Oh, he also knew Romeo Bridden. Okay.
Yeah,
Mm.
they, it's not that they were constantly together, but they had great respect and their ease with each other.
Yeah.
They really
That's
enjoyed each other's
right.
work.
Yeah, and I think one of the first younger artists that he sort of really kind of related to was Joe Louis. They did a lot of work together. Joe Louis had him up at Fashion Moda and then did a lot of work with him out on the West Coast.
That makes sense too.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think Joe actually met Colescott at UCSD.
Okay.
Right? They were all there just right around the same time. So yeah, these sort of, the ways I think in which artists sort of connect with one another is always interesting. And these ideas about influence, you're talking to, his interest in, music and poetry was as deep as this sort of interest in the visual arts, going back to Mimi's point earlier, right? This desire to have somebody like Quincy Troupe be a part of the offering at the Venice Biennale and contributing to the catalog. There was something else that he was trying to figure out, another way of engaging with this, with the circle of artists that I think is really important. And any number of painters that I know, artists that I know, have all been sort of deeply influenced and use music as a kind of barometer for the way in which they live their lives.
Definitely a lot of musical references in the work, and literary references, and getting back to the just general cultural thing. Janova, I asked her about the French. How well did he speak French? He read in French. She pointed out somebody did that he would have spoken French with his. Oh, maybe Matthew. No, who was it? Somebody pointed out he spoke French with his first wife because she didn't speak English. So he and Janova would speak French at home, and they was So I think that the relationship to literature and to music is another fun way to look at the work and get into the work, and a lot of the wordplay stuff and. Nothing got by him, so if you see it in there, the chances are it's there for, because he put it there because he had a reason.
Grace? Thank you. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was asking Lowery about is I was looking at legacy, kind of questions around legacy and what came after him in Venice, so we have Fred Wilson, we have Martin Purrier, we have Mike Bradford, we have Simone Lee, and almost everybody had a literary allusion in the title of their show, so then I had to call her and say, hey, is this something I don't know about, or how does this, and I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's really worth noting that, that the reference points, it's always a clue to what's going on.
Lowery, I think it's time to wrap up for tonight, unfortunately.
Go home. Keep cool, hydrate, and vote. Carrie, we're so happy that you could join us.
I'm so glad that I was here. I'm so sorry that I'm not in this room with you all. I have no idea who's in the audience. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
So
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Be well, everyone.